Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Well, Missouri Southern is well known for its international mission with opportunities to study abroad. Well, today we're taking a slightly different focus, studying and learning within the United States. And we're going to focus on a trip in May of 2018 with some students and faculty who went to Washington, D.C. Joining me, we have Nicole Shoaf from the Political Science Department, Justin Larsen, and Jacob King. Thank you for being here today.
Good to be
Thank you for having us.
You had an opportunity to incorporate a class and then students and study abroad. So Nicole, let's just start off with some background. If somebody says, well, what was the course? How did this idea generate?
Well, political science has been doing what we call traveling seminars for a number of years now. About every other year, we take a week-long trip somewhere with one of the classes. But what was unique about this time is it's interdisciplinary. And so we had Megan Bever, professor of history here, and Dr. Delahante, one of my colleagues in political science, co-teaching a class.
Okay. So you had a class that met during the spring semester then?
Yes, yeah, we went with the last 8 weeks of the spring semester, and then we spent 8 days in Washington, D.C. following that. And it was a wonderful experience. We had students from a variety of major programs, not just history and political science, but English and physics and education as well.
Now, is this one of the first time you've tried the interdisciplinary approach with it?
Yeah, this is the first time I've co-taught a class and the first time that I've done so interdisciplinary as well. But it was a wonderful experience for the faculty. It's been something the three of us, Dr. Bever, Delahante, and I have been discussing for a couple of years now. And we found time in the schedule and enough students who were interested in the experience to make it actually happen.
What was the name of the class?
Building a Republic.
Okay.
And so we focused on the development of the United States. We went all the way back to the founding era. We focused on the development of the National Mall in Washington, D.C., and how the monuments and memorials that are in Washington, D.C. sort of help us understand American history.
So a direct tie into where you were going to go at the end of the semester afterwards.
Yes.
And tying that together. Well, from the student perspective, I'm curious what sparked your interest, the title of the course, or what made you interested in saying, I'd like to try this?
Well, honestly, for me, it was the prospect of going to D.C. I had never been, and I have an interest in political science as well as history, so I thought what a better way to do it than to take this class and have a trip, to where not only will I be able to learn about it beforehand, but I'll also have like a guided tour while I'm there. So that was the main reason I did it.
How about your reaction?
And for me, absolutely, the little bit of the name, building a republic, and this is our country, our republic, and it's always been a dream of mine to go to Washington, D.C., and so to finally get to fulfill that through school, especially through Missouri Southern, it was really something special, yeah.
So of course you have the academic side. You said co-teaching a class. So between the three of you, you split up and kind of taught your areas of specialty to the students?
Yeah, so we each sort of had a part of the class period each week where we got to discuss something. Dr. Delahante brought in a political theory reading every week. I brought something in from contemporary politics, news articles that we got to discuss, and Dr. Bever brought in historical perspective, which I think for me personally was one of the more interesting aspects of it, to hear a historian talk about the things that we discuss in political science all the time, because historians approach things from a very different angle than us, and it was an interesting experience.
So it was beneficial to the faculty members as well.
Absolutely. It was the most fun I've ever had teaching a class, without a doubt.
So when people think about assignments, what kind of work did you do before you got to leave on the trip, the type of classwork that you covered?
Well, in addition to the 3 teaching segments, there was a 4th. Because the students each week would have to have a small teaching segment that they would assign. So 2 or 3 would get up and present a piece of what we had all been assigned to discuss in front of the class as kind of the teaching segment. So we would have to do, if that wasn't our weekly focus, then each week we'd have a set of reading assignments, which we'd have to discuss openly and actively in class. And also submit a small paper, just a brief kind of summation of what we thought of it each week on the weekly or through Blackboard.
Did you find that this was kind of team building for the group before you went, getting to work with your classmates this way?
It was. I got to work with a couple other people from class, people that I didn't know before, and that I made good friends with after, so it was very much beneficial in that regard. And I really appreciated it.
So history majors perhaps learning things in political science you hadn't thought about, and vice versa, political science learning about history.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. It was probably the most well-rounded class I had taken in this area, especially because of the multiple angles of teaching. And then we were all forced to talk almost.
Made you, yeah.
We had to talk, which was
had to
really
participate, right.
It was very participation heavy, yeah, which was very good because then, there's some classes that I've had where no one says a word to each other, and then can you imagine being on a 3-hour, flight and then 8
Nobody
days
talking
in
to
a
each other,
hotel
yeah.
with these people that you've never said a word to. We were all, like friends by the time we had made it to the trip, and then the trip was just fantastic. We all hung out and everything during the trip and went to most of the locations together. It was fantastic.
So you had the class during the regular semester, and then of course commencement came, and then you took off right after commencement, flew the group to Washington.
Absolutely, yeah. The Tuesday after, we flew out before dawn
Yeah.
to get an early start.
Yeah, we were, they were like, when did our flight leave? It was about 7:30-ish.
Yeah.
And there was some people that got there the night before we did. We got there the night before and got up early, and then some people drove through the night, just like stayed up until 2 and then drove down. It was, but I think everyone had that nervous excitement to get there, make sure we didn't miss our flight and everything. It was a lot of fun.
Yep, it was
It
good.
was a wonderful opportunity because a lot of our students had never gone to DC, and a number of the students had never flown before, and so this was one of their first big travel experiences. And to be able to do it in a group of people that you're comfortable with,
Right.
I think made it a really great first experience.
So kind of supporting each other as well there on that travel experience.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Had either of you been to Washington before?
I have not.
Never been to Washington. I've been all over. Never to Washington.
So this was your
it was good.
first
Yes,
visit to
it was
the
very
nation's
good.
capital as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, there were things that, I don't know if I can speak for everybody, but there were things that I had built up in my mind that were going to be awesome that weren't as awesome as I thought. But then there were things that I hadn't that just took my breath away. When we got there, our very first evening, we walked to our hotel, and then we all took the train to the National Mall. And there's this moment where we all kind of walked out, and we're standing in between, and on the left you look and you see the Washington Monument, and on the right the Capitol building, and it's just, it was like breathtaking.
We
it was
are here.
amazing. It was such a moment that I'll never forget that. Yeah, it was fantastic.
And you say take the train, that's like the underground
Yeah,
subway train,
yeah,
so you
the
come up
metro.
out of the ground
Yeah,
in the
we
metro.
literally kind of come up to this just whole world. It was great. It was fantastic.
Right. Well, we're going to talk a little bit, let people find out about your trip and what you had. I know you have some pictures as well, so I think if we can, as we go along, we'll kind of explain what we're seeing on the pictures, but tie that into how it correlated, tied into the trip. I think one of the first displays is, I imagine this is an exhibit from the Smithsonian?
Yeah, this is from the American Museum of the American Indian Museum, and this is the first time I'd ever been there, but I think this is one of the museums that gets overlooked a lot in Washington, D.C., which is really unfortunate because it was probably one of the best curated museums I've ever been to. And it has a sense of humor that you wouldn't expect from a population that's experienced what the Native Americans of the United States
The
have.
title here said True Democracy. I mean, that's kind of making people think there's something you may not have thought about. What was the country
Absolutely.
like in a history perspective, in 1830? So you were learning, you probably, I'm sure, read about these in advance, but then to be able to see the exhibits, tell me a little bit about the American History Museum, seeing some of the things that was probably some, as you say, artifacts you haven't seen before.
I actually wasn't able to visit that one. That was on our list, and like we were talking before the show, there was just not enough time to
Fit everything
squeeze
in.
every single. There was so much to do, and next time I go, that's going to be first on my list. That, and we had gone to the Holocaust Museum, but you had to get tickets to part of it, and so we didn't make that. So that's on there too.
So part of this trip is kind of whet your appetite for going back.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All these museums you could spend a whole day in. For sure.
You could. Several of them had multi-floors, and some of them we had to go back on a separate day. You couldn't even make it through in one day. We went to the museum, and they give you a ticket for 2 days because they know it's 7 floors of just, packed full of awesome information.
Great. Well, we had a picture that popped up there. It looked like it was Arlington National Cemetery. Is that correct, what we're looking at that?
Yeah, I think our last full day, we spent the morning at Arlington, and it's a beautiful location.
Yeah, the greenery and the sights here.
Yeah.
Looks like it's overlooking the hillside. And so what about the impact when you go there and you see all of those graves and what's represented there?
You don't realize the scope until they start throwing numbers out at you. Like I think there was over 400,000 buried there, and they still do like up to 30 a month. I think they said they still add. And I had, up until that point, I thought it was only servicemen, but I learned that there were family members of certain servicemen and other dignitaries and stuff in there as well. So, and I didn't know how they kept them clean. Did you know that? I walked by and they were power washing.
All those white markers.
All of them.
On the day I went, they were. It was raining that day, and there wasn't a lot of people, so it was nice to go there during that kind of time. But we saw a couple funerals when we were there. My group did, of 2 or 3 of us, and you know, it was just really something to see that. I mean,
Kind of a humbling experience to see those as they happen.
Absolutely. Yes.
Did you get to see the changing of the guard that we hear so much about as well?
That was quite an experience. Very. It was interesting to watch, and I know that some people will take whatever, you know, from the experience that they do, but I found it fascinating how mechanical it was. It was just so,
very precise in what they're doing.
Yeah, so I mean, to the step, to the second, to I mean, they were so. It was so uniform, and it was almost beautiful in how just perfect it was.
They kept that tradition going, and they keep that tradition going.
Absolutely, yeah.
And some interesting history, I understand, with Arlington as well, just how that cemetery came about.
Absolutely. I say that one of the most interesting things for me on this trip was having Dr. Bever along, who's a Civil War historian. And so wandering through the American History Museum and wandering through Arlington, she has all these facts at her, just at her fingertips that she can pull. So it's like having a private tour guide everywhere you go.
That's how we felt everywhere we went with all of you. It was great.
So the faculty giving you this information firsthand.
We would walk up and be like, hey, what about this? And we'd get some great piece of information, some fun fact. Every time we turned around, it was fantastic.
Yeah, the heart of the land was confiscated during the Civil War from a Confederate general. And so and the house is still on the property. And the photo we saw a few minutes ago is right outside the house. Overlooking the city.
So the Union troops took it and said, we're going to turn this into a cemetery for our soldiers. And
absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of a backhanded.
And it was spit in the face.
But now it's a national monument for what we have. And so
for all time. Yeah.
Right. Well, I know that you mentioned teaching in the class. I think the next picture that we have shows someone doing a presentation here. So tell me what's happening here.
Me and Caleb.
Yeah, so here the students were all required to do what we call a comparative site analysis. They researched 3 sites in DC before we left, and then visited each of those sites while we were there. And when we traveled to these sites as a group, the students who specialized in those, who had researched those, shared with the rest of us information. So we have Caleb Howerton here over near the Capitol building explaining the history and the symbolic meaning behind one of the statues that he studied.
So you were taking what you learned in the classroom, bringing it with you, and sharing it with the others there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that made it great too, because some people had things that, like, some of us had very formulaic things that we were doing ours over. I did mine over Lincoln, and you know, that's pretty common, I would imagine. But then some had really interesting things. One of us had one over the different kinds of pillars that were used in the different monuments.
So kind of tying into the architecture.
Yeah, and I was like, you know, I didn't even think about, you know, going that route. I was just kind of single-minded on historical people instead of just, you know, several. There were so many different done, and on hers was on the pillars, and I actually learned quite a bit about the different kind of pillars.
So your learning continues as you're on the trip. It's more than, you know, we're just sightseeing and seeing these sites and so forth. Now I think we had another picture that shows the group. It looks like you're in the Capitol building.
Yeah, this is right before our official tour of the U.S. Capitol building.
So you were able to get inside and then do the tour. Did you get to see the chambers or inside the?
A couple
Some
people
of
got
us
to see
did.
the
Yeah,
Me
we
and
got
this
to.
guy did.
We got to go see them. We had passes, and so we went and checked out. I got to see the House floor. You got to see both, though.
I saw both of them a couple times. Yeah, I got to see him vote both times too. So that was very
awesome.
interesting. I mean,
So they were in session while you were there. You were seeing them.
I saw everybody. Yeah, you name him, I saw him. Yep, it was really something.
Yeah, stuff you'll never forget.
So we see, you know, C-SPAN on TV, and they see people talking about debates in Washington. What was it like to sit in the balcony and see these things happen in front of you?
My experience was it was much smaller than it looks like on television. It was a lot smaller. Have you been in? Yeah, because on the camera adds so many different
looks like it.
angles, and so when we were sitting there, I was like, this is not. How do they pack all these people in here? Because like when you see them do like a big State of the Union, address, they're panning the crowd, and you've got all these people, and it was not as big as I thought. It's not as big of a crowd as you think it is, but it was very interesting.
What about the procedures for debate or discussion, when they're actually talking about things?
Well, the way that they begin and end it is really special, and I'll let that to people that go there and see it. You can go see it, and you'll know how they end and begin it. But it's very good. It's very special.
So it kind of teaches you that democracy in action. As you're
Absolutely.
talking.
Absolutely, and it's really amazing to be able to take people to actually see the national government doing things live in person. And this reaction, we also went to the Supreme Court, and they weren't in session at the time, but they had the doors open, and so you could sort of walk up and see the red velvet curtains and the bench there. And for the students who spend years studying political science and history, reading about all of these things, and to be able to see it in person, I think it really helps personalize our government.
This is the place where these decisions were made and things that happened along those lines.
Absolutely, and you see people wandering around who, the actual humans who make the decisions.
So did you recognize congressmen or senators as you were in there
Oh,
saying,
yeah.
"Oh, there's so-and-so, I see."
I saw a couple of them. Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Bernie Sanders.
I saw Bernie, yeah.
Oh, Bernie.
I saw everybody. Oh, yeah. Believe it.
How about the scurrying behind the scenes? We hear so much about Capitol support, the aides and the other people, in addition to the ones who we've elected. You see a lot of people scurrying around doing those things as well?
I didn't notice a lot of it, but I could have been focused on so many other things. One thing I found myself doing was anytime I saw someone near like a Capitol building or a government building in a suit, I was like, who's that?
They're dressed up.
Where are they going? What are they doing? So that was fun.
And within the Capitol itself, there are some statues. Do you get to see Statuary Hall and the monuments in there?
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's a lot of history within the building beyond just the debates.
Yeah, we all took that Capitol tour, which was phenomenal. Getting to walk through the Capitol and get like firsthand guide from their tour guides themselves, and it was great. Lots of pictures and
Kind
everything.
of quick. It was kind of
It
rushed.
was. It wasn't as long as I thought it was going to be. Did you?
Very well
think
worth
it was
it,
about
absolutely.
45 minutes.
Yeah, there's a lot more there that you can see.
So it was a quick walking tour. Here's
Yeah,
that.
we went with the one that's publicly available to
Right.
everybody else, and so it was sort of a crash course in the U.S.
Yeah.
Capitol building.
Right. So you would go back now and get more of the intensive study. And
We need to find a congressman or woman that can let us up in the very top
The
balcony.
rotunda.
Yeah.
contact your local congressman and say, bring us up there.
Apparently, you have to have a special invitation for that.
Okay. Well, we also have another picture, I believe, that ties into some of the items and displays that you had debating the path forward. Tell me a little bit about this display, another museum display.
This is phenomenal. We were able to get into the American Museum of African American History and Culture. And there's a waiting list to get in this museum. It opened a couple years ago, but it's incredibly difficult to get into. But we managed to they have a Walk-Up Wednesday program in May this year they were piloting. And so we were able to get inside. And this is one of the displays. And it focuses on sort of how influential African Americans throughout history have sort of disagreed on the best approach to fight for legal and political equality, whether to take an aggressive approach or whether to be sort of more accepting of baby steps and steps backwards, which I think the context was really amazing.
So within that museum, you're seeing the history and how it developed through their presentations.
Absolutely.
And the names of the people that we couldn't, maybe people can see at home, but they're well-known leaders at the time who were debating these
Absolutely.
issues.
I think that was, I'm interested to hear all this, way the students reacted to that one, because that was one museum that it wasn't open the last time I was in DC. And so it was an amazing.
Yeah, it was a great museum. It was interesting how it was made. It kind of was multi-level, like most of them are, but you started in the basement and you traveled through time up each
So
level.
it represents years as you're going up.
It was a beautifully architecturally made building. It was fantastic.
And as a history interest, you find that takes you beyond the books, what you're able to read in time.
Absolutely. I mean, that museum, like any of them, you could spend a whole day in
Yeah.
and not see everything because there's so much in all of them. And,
Yeah, that was probably the worst part of the trip is you would have to cut your time. in
We've got to
some-
leave here to go there.
Yeah, there were floors you couldn't. You'd just be like, well, we can hit 3 floors of this one if we want to make 2 floors of the next one. So, But
tying that together.
Absolutely worth it.
yeah.
Well, let's look at another picture that we have as a presentation for. This is standing in front of one of the memorials then, your group, part of your group.
Grant.
Yep, Grant.
So
That was
you're-
on our first day there. Our first evening.
walked down
That was
there.
right after we. I was talking about us coming up from the metro and looking to the left, seeing the memorial, and right the Capitol building. That was on
that
the
was
Capitol
we
building
are there
side.
picture.
Yes.
Hey, let's go on to the next photograph then, and
Lincoln.
you're inside the Lincoln Memorial here then. Huh?
Yeah,
Yes,
that
at the
was
top
great.
of the steps.
So looking out and behind you, we can see the Washington Monument in the background.
Right.
So-
And
You
it's
see
wonderful
him
that everyone
everywhere.
is smiling because right before you can't tell from the picture, but we are all drenched.
Yeah,
It was raining
we
that
were
day.
drenched probably
Yeah.
6 of the
Raining a lot
8
of the
days.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first 2
I think I see an
days were
umbrella in one of the
really
hands there,
yes,
right?
and there's like a short break in the weather that allowed us to sort of get a
So
nice
in
picture
addition to
there.
walking all those miles, you also got the
We were in
weather
the rain for all those miles.
I
Yeah,
think 4 days. I just didn't have
Yeah.
dry feet.
yeah, it was.
Then you
interesting.
left the memorial and came down the steps, which I understand there are quite a few steps to walk back
A
down.
lot of steps, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 57.
You counted.
Yeah.
58,
Yeah.
yes, 57, yeah, right.
So back at the
somewhere
base of the steps, getting another group. What was your impression when you walked in and saw that monument? And of course, here we have the Martin Luther King Memorial as well. Seeing those in person.
I did mine over Lincoln, and so I had a special focus on the ones that, of course, had him involved, and that one was amazing. It was as good as I was hoping it would be. It was as awe-inspiring. He was, I mean, godlike. It was humongous. It was clean. It was well kept.
Did people, when they walk in there, suddenly get quiet? I mean, was it something?
Yeah,
that they
there
were
was-
kind of.
All the way up until you get in, it was very loud, just because the clatter on the stairs. People are running up, taking pictures and everything. It was very interesting. A lot of the memorials and monuments, there were more people, it seemed like, taking pictures than actually really taking in.
Looking at it and
Yeah.
saying, wow.
But if you stood there long enough, everyone got their pictures and then would really kind of soak in what they were there to do. But everything had a gift shop.
Every memorial had a next door
Everything
gift shop.
had a gift shop. That was interesting. Even there, I thought there's no way there's going to be a gift shop here. And then right up there, you're looking at Lincoln, and then to the right, there's a gift shop.
So the National Park Service is out there with
They-
gift shops.
It was pretty interesting. You could get all your Lincoln swag if you wanted it. But yeah, it was beautiful. It was something that everyone should go see.
Representing, and of course, we have the Martin Luther King Memorial, and that would look like it was a night shot there. So that must have been a
Yeah,
special
if you ever
effect
go to
with the lighting.
DC, I absolutely recommend going to the National Mall at night because there are fewer people there. It's not empty because everyone else knows it's beautiful as well. But the monuments and memorials are lit up, and it adds sort of an extra layer to the ambiance.
Yeah.
We
It's
did sort
gorgeous.
of MLK, Lincoln, and the Tidal Basin where Jefferson and the FDR were at night. And it's just absolutely gorgeous.
Walking through there with the lights, as you can see, focusing on that. You're
Oh,
not distracted by the other
gorgeous
things and tying
at
all
night.
it together. I think we also have a picture. You mentioned the Supreme Court. So here you are outside the doors of the Supreme
Yeah,
Court.
this is the steps as we were coming out.
So posing there, and then you have the inside picture, I believe, after this. So we can kind of
Yes.
look over your shoulders in the back and see the
Yeah,
gardens
in
you
the
were
very
mentioning.
back, if you look closely, those seats are where the 9 justices sit when they are in session. And a number of the students in that photograph are planning on going to law school, and so to be sort of within touching distance of those crimson robes, it was really amazing for them.
For them to really say, this is where it all, our country's focus is on here on the
Absolutely.
the judicial branch. And then we have another monument. Tell me about this one that we're looking at.
This is on the White House grounds. The student sort of closest to the camera is Henry Gregory, and he's explaining the significance of this particular monument. He focused on monuments and memorials around DC that focused on LGBTQ history, which was sort of a new angle, a unique angle for the class. And this is, I forget which particular monument this is, but he's explaining to everybody the history of it.
So did you find yourself almost every time you turn a corner, there's some sort of monument or marker? I mean, were you kind of...
Yeah,
They're everywhere.
Yeah, and if it's not there, it's a plaque of what used to be there. It was something is somewhere at all times. You're never bored.
So definitely there's something to see every
Yes,
time you turn.
I think that was across from the Blythe House. Is that right? Yeah, which was great.
Dr. Virginia Last.
Last, Dr. Last.
We had two adults audit the class, including a former history professor from the university. Dr. Virginia Last joined us. And so there were a couple times when she was able to pipe up and tell us about a little bit about where her research intersected with what we were seeing. And so that was sort of an added
It's just a
layer
little
of things learned.
bonus. It was great.
Going above and beyond what you're anticipating having and so
it
forth.
was awesome.
So if someone were to ask you, student-wise, what's your favorite memory from the trip, what would you say for them?
Oh, my favorite memory, all of it. I mean,
Oh man,
everything.
yeah.
The whole trip itself.
I can't pick one. I mean,
My favorite memory, I think I even have it with me, was getting my official library card at the Library of Congress.
Like, I mean,
Went and read a book up there for a while. It was fantastic.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was
Did the same
a
thing.
highlight. That was one of my favorite experiences. Got to go back though. It expires in 2 years, so
You've got to plan that
I
trip
got to
ahead.
get back there. Got to keep that up.
I imagine this is really rewarding from a faculty perspective, and when you see the impact it has on the students for this type of study.
Absolutely. I love traveling with students, particularly students at Missouri Southern who disproportionately are low income and haven't traveled broadly, to take them to some place like DC and to see them pop out of the subway for the first time and see the National Mall, something they've seen in movies and television, and we spent the whole semester reading about, were literally some people sort of bouncing up and down. There was a squeal from someone, I don't know who it was.
Oh, that's probably me.
So to teach, it's always rewarding when students enjoy your class and then learn something. But then to be able to take them somewhere where they can apply and sort of really absorb what they've learned is incredibly rewarding. And so to have support from the university to be able to do this is amazing.
And that's an aspect we haven't mentioned. There was the support, just like international travel, helps support you with within the state's travel.
Yeah,
as
the
well.
International Studies Committee allowed us to have a grant that we put towards reducing the costs for students. So the students paid part of it, but they all had part of it subsidized by the university. And we were able to get costs down for students to $870. All inclusive.
For those 8 days of Washington.
Yeah, but they had to buy their own souvenirs and some of their own food. But which isn't for 8 days and 7
That's a
nights.
great deal.
$100 a day. I spend that now.
in Joplin.
In Joplin,
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like a great opportunity, and you mentioned the interdisciplinary approach, probably more goals in the future to try this again for other classes.
Yeah, the second day, Delahante, Bever, and I were walking down the National Mall, and we're like, okay, what other classes can we teach? Where else do our interests overlap? How can we do this again? And so there's, coming up in the next year or so, we'll be doing another civil rights tour of the South. So we class on civil rights and then traveling for a week as on a road trip across the American South. And we're planning an environmental history, environmental policy travel course, hopefully within the next few years. That's sort of in the initial planning stages.
A lot of possibilities. Well, I'd like to thank the three of you for visiting with me today and sharing with the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on this station. We'll see you then.